for us, we felt like the level that we were at that point, to get to a higher level was going to require things that were not our goals from debating. Like when you get to
Oh,
that high of a level, it's more about like maybe being more tactical about the kind of arguments you run in different rooms, because then it's
yeah.
about like knowing your judges or knowing your audience.
That's a really interesting view on how to think of or to experience higher level debating. And it also just points to the natural fact that people have different experiences, different expectations, or different interactions with different things. So I sort of have a completely opposite relationship with the stages of debating that you have. Before we continue, here's some amazing news for you. The Shaft podcast has begun a fun and more interactive part of our podcast journey dubbed the Shaft Board. Now, on the Shaft Board, we get to slay giants, we get to spark controversies, we get to discuss the legends of the game, and we get to discover issues and experience the fun moments within your debating journey. So enjoy the board on our various social media channels. Let's get interactive. You'd always see a weekly update on the experiences we want you to share and stand the chance of getting your comments and interactions featured on our social media platforms and also on our special Shaft Board podcast episodes. So hope to see you on the board sometime and enjoy the period. Welcome back from that short break. This is the Shaft Podcast, and remember to subscribe to our channel. We are in a conversation with Anam. She, like I said, is an incredible person. I've had an illustrious debate career. Um, the earlier parts of the podcast have recounted on the experiences with debate retirement, the partnership with Lindo, and also some of the competition, and also discussing mainly how addictive debate can be. The next part of this segment, we want to touch on a few things that are probably more interesting. First, I want to know, did it get to a point where you finally admitted you had an OG case? Like, yeah, I think at this
Yeah,
point I do.
no. I think it got to a point that everyone had to just admit that, because my entire like it's like a long-standing joke that like I will
Yeah,
always pick OG in the final.
yeah,
So I will get to the
yeah,
final and then I will pick OG in the final.
yeah.
So this started all the way back at my first Nats. Picked OG in the final,
Oh,
picked OG literally throughout break rounds. Like I think there were maybe one or two rounds
wow,
where I was not OG, but it was always OG in the final. Always, always.
wow.
And always OG in any situation where there's a break round, it was always
Yeah,
OG. Or even like,
yeah,
most tournaments, like most local tournaments would have like 5 rounds. So you would have one position twice. And for me, it was always OG that I did twice. Everyone else would have like CG twice, OO
yeah,
twice.
yeah,
I was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
OG twice. Like if there was any situation where I could be OG, I was just OG. That's just how it was. That's like the case for JR. Like all big tournaments I can
Yeah.
think of
Because every
that
every single final video I can search for now has you in opening government.
OG, literally
Yeah,
OG.
it was weird. That aside you, the other person I know has an OG case is Karim. Karim would enter every final and pick OG.
Yeah.
And 2019 PADC, he just what picked, he still had OG. I was like, man,
Yeah.
this
No,
guy's
for
just been
sure.
picking OG all his life.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
And
But
but
mine, sorry.
did it have any influence on how you viewed OG though? Did you eventually
Yes.
end up appreciating the position or the role?
Yes. So for sure, I think I worked the hardest on. In fact, for me, I had I always anticipated picking OG in finals and in big tournaments. Like it was, yeah, it was just something that I knew was going to happen. So I actually was extremely, extremely clinical in how I did a prime minister's speech. So I
Yeah.
really, really invested a lot of time in the. I think out of everything, the thing I became the most comfortable with was the prime minister's speech. So I think OG is very hard. Um,
Yeah.
but if I always, in fact, like I always used to coach OG. Even like what I used to get called to coach was also how
Yeah,
to
it
do
was
OGs and how to do.
always about OG. Yeah.
It was always about, but specifically prime minister speeches. So I became very good at doing prime minister speeches, and it's because I had like a very, very clinical setup. Like with debating in general, I think I have to have like, for me, structure is really important for any speech. So the way I
Yeah.
structure my speeches is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. So for me, like the prime minister's speech, I had like a a staple piece of paper, like it was like three papers, and that was like my template on how I did prime minister speeches. So what I would actually do is and how I prepped OG prep sessions was also very clinical. So for me, it was 7 minutes. We both sit and we just think. Then
Yeah.
for about 5.5 minutes, we speak. And then for 1.5 minutes, I just need silence so I can think. But I became so comfortable doing prime minister speeches that I knew exactly how to run the prep session. And at the end of the prep session, I would need 1 minute, not to write a speech, but to just think and to just have silence. I would prep my opening line because I felt like if
Yeah.
you had an opening statement, you could start off confident. But after
Yeah.
that, I knew how to structure it. Like I didn't have to write down the prime minister's speech. It was just, it had
Okay.
like a set structure that I'd prepared, and I would just fit
Wow.
things into that structure.
No, this inflates the amount of respect I had for your PM speeches. Because I'm a speaker who writes literally every word I say. The very best speeches you would hear me give, it's because I had the time to write as many things as possible. So even in OG, I would still need about 5, 6 minutes out of prep to write out my speech so that I'm ready. And so to listen to the standard of OG speeches and PM speeches you used to give and tell me the only part that you needed to rehearse or prep or be critical of, like had it preset, was the opening line, and the rest could come out of practice and out of just being good at. Nah,
It's
that's really shocking.
because I realized there isn't enough time to write a PM. Like, if you
Yeah,
spend time writing the PM, you don't have enough time to actually discuss the topic fully. And, like,
yeah,
from OG, what I learned is OG is all about control. So you have to have
yeah,
control over the debate. So a lot of the time, people will spend their time like preparing a case, but they didn't have the time in prep, or they didn't have like the foresight to think what's CG going to say, what's OO going to say. So, like, the
yeah,
two things I would always say is preemption. So, what I would do in prime minister speeches is like, even in from the prime minister's speech, I'd pick the two biggest arguments that the opposition can speak about, and one out of the box argument that the opposition can speak about. And I would preempt the rebuttal to that. So I would say like, these are two things that the opposition is going to talk about, but I'm going to preemptively rebut it. So from prime minister,
yeah,
you already start rebuttal, because the problem with OG is that you become quite irrelevant. But if you can already
yeah,
pick out the
yeah,
arguments, and through using like an out of the box argument that your opposition is going to talk about, you can sort of preempt an extension, or at least give your opposition something that they will also want to. Like, if you give them their argument, they're going to talk about it, and at best you'll
yeah,
be second because you'll keep the engagement like in
yeah,
the long
yeah.
diagonal. So
That's true.
it's like those kinds of things that you honestly only think about when you do OG, like an excessive amounts of time. But those are like, from doing that, that's what I learned. And I honestly think that my best speeches were prime ministers. Like, even all the speeches everyone generally watches, and they like ask me about are my prime minister speeches.
That's amazing. I'm just going to ask one question. For me, there was this period where um I was forced to do OG in training for 10 consecutive rounds because, first of all, I was that bad at OG before that. but also because I used to shaft a lot when I was in closing. And the coach
Mm.
at the time wanted me to stop shafting. So he forced me to do OG, so I just don't do closing. And I used to Iron Man in those OG roles. I hated that period. Trust me, it was dreadful. But eventually, I got better at OG. These days, I'm much better. Did you have to, at a point, subject yourself to that form of constant training in OG just to get better at it because you were anticipating that would be your most likely role in a lot of crucial rounds?
I mean, honestly, my training came from the fact that I had to pick it in finals and then I had to be good at it because the stakes were that high.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
think like my periods of growth came from me like digging deep and being like, yo, we
Oh,
worked so hard to get here.
yeah.
And I will say like I do think like honestly there's a bias against OG and that comes from adjudication. And I don't think that
Yeah.
particularly in the African circuit and the Southern African circuit, people are fair to OG because um, like a lot of the time when I think when it's between an opening and a closing, the bias just goes towards the closing. Like it's just assumed that the
Yeah.
closing, like if it's close, it doesn't go towards the opening.
Yeah.
And I still do maintain that I think that that's quite unfair. Um, but I will say, even every time I lost in OG, it was never an obvious loss. It was always extremely
Yeah.
contentious. Like it was always on splits. The adjudication went on for a very long time. It was never like I came third or fourth. It was always like a contentious loss. So I think the becoming good at it was just from how many times I picked it. But like when me and Linda would train, we would train just me and her, and we essentially just do an open half. Um, so like I would be the OG and she'd be the OO, and we would Iron Man, and that's how we would train. But also another thing about OG is a lot of the time the prime minister's speech is very important, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about the prime minister's speech and doing the prime minister's speech. But
Yeah.
the deputy prime minister's speech is also like it's such a technical role because the deputy prime minister isn't just a continuation of the prime minister. It's like the deputy prime minister's role is so important because they have to really listen to their prime minister. Because a lot of the time, like for me, every time I did a prime minister's speech, I didn't really prepare it. I just spoke about it a lot and tried to understand the
Yeah.
topic a lot because I realized that's the advantage that closing teams have is that they're able to
Talk
absorb.
about things a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're able to like absorb the debate, whereas when you're an opening you just have to like you feel this pressure to just write your speech. So I realized if I can just spend my prep time really absorbing, really being preemptive, seeing all sides of the debate, then it would be more valuable and I would have a better chance. But it meant that every time I had a deputy prime minister, they didn't actually know what I was going to say. So we had outlined
Okay.
like
Okay.
like if we had a policy, we'd outline the policy, and would
Yeah.
outline like general points, but they didn't actually know what I was going to say. So they had to fill in my gaps and listen
Yeah.
really carefully. So the role of
Yeah.
the deputy prime minister is also extremely important.
When you picked when you picked OG in PADC 2020 final, and like in all the finals that you picked OG, when you realized it became a trend, and obviously because people were saying, "Oh, this is an Anam thing," and then it started happening. How did you react to it anytime it happened? Did it go like, "Ah, this again," or was it like, "Well, as usual"?
Honestly, initially it was kind of annoying. But I will say again, it's not the role. I just think it's not adjudicated fairly because I think if there's that much of a bias
Okay.
and if there's that much of a reaction against OG, then I think
Yeah.
there is. I do think that there
It's
is
more
like a
reflective of the bias.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do think there is because it shouldn't be like that. Like it shouldn't be like you pick CO and then you're like, oh yeah, like I have such a huge.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
shouldn't be
Yeah.
that way. And it's not reflective of the international circuit because most of the time the international circuit, OG is the one that wins. Or oh, they say is the best role. So like, I don't think that there's. I do think that it was annoying because I don't think it was adjudicated fairly. Um,
Yeah.
but honestly, I felt like, and Linda also felt that our the way we're going to solidify ourselves in the circuit is going to be through OG because we knew that there's a
Yeah.
reason that we keep getting OG and it's because we are being chosen to be really really good at it And honestly, I
Yeah.
felt like if we were gonna win, we were gonna win from OG, and we were gonna show that like
Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
contentious
Yeah.
from, and we were
Yeah.
gonna break that cycle. Because I think for all of us, for all African debaters, when it came to like around the COVID period, it was about bridging that gap between the international
Yeah.
circuit and us. And I
Yeah.
think that was a commitment that all of us had, right? Like
Yeah.
we were all very committed to that goal, and I think that's why we all are so close compared to other circuits, and I
Yeah.
think that's why we genuinely want each other to do well. And I think part of bridging that gap was to change the way OG was perceived, because in the international circuit it isn't like that.
That's true. That's true.
OG wins a lot. It wins more often.
Yeah.
In look at
Yeah.
WTC finals, most of the time they win from OG.
Yeah.
So part of that was changing the perception of OG, and like changing how we do OG, and really I think rising to the occasion. I think that's what it became in the end. Is it wasn't
Yeah.
like obviously it was like can we have a break? But when we picked it, like the second we picked it, I remember we were like, we are going to win from OG, and we're going to show that you can win from OG. And
Yeah.
honestly, those speeches, I remember the 2020 final, and those speeches were very, from our career, those were very good, like a very good performance that I'm very proud of. It wasn't like we picked OG and we were just like, oh, okay, we'll try again
No.
next year.
It was. Those are speeches that left impressions. Like it's one of the speeches where you walk away from the final and they asked you which speeches do you think you are memorable to you, or which team stamped their authority in that final? And obviously OG is one of them. So it was a really good speech. And it's also evidence of how good you became at doing it, right? Because it was like you know they are very, very good speakers. And when you get them in OG, you know that's their weak spot. And you know that's the
Yes.
time to get at them. Then it was like that was no more a weak spot for you because you get OG and now there's no weakness. You can't obviously fight against it. And it's like you had to put in your all. There was no off day for teams that were
Yeah.
facing you in OG, right? Because and then that became a very, very big strength as well. So at least in the end, the OG cares wasn't such a bad thing for you. You,
Yeah,
you,
no,
you got
it
great at it.
really,
Yeah,
I mean, when I think about it, even like there are a lot of, I've won some things, but I know that I haven't
yeah,
won, like, there are definitely people that have won more things than me. But I
yeah.
think that there's still an impression, or like, there's still, I think, like yeah, like, there's still I'm still able to make a name for myself despite maybe not winning, because, and I think it's because of the performance, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it shows that maybe even if you don't have like a trophy at the end, if you put out a really good consistent performance, then you're still able to like solidify yourself as being good.
That's true. For a lot of us, we pick debate as debate, and we are so fixated on the debate lessons. So, for instance, learning the skills of debate, learning the art of debating, reading things, and solely reading them for the purpose of using them in debates. But I also know there are non-debate lessons, as in lessons that are technically not being applied in debate, like how to do CEO or something. But these are equally valuable lessons that doing debate consistently or being within the space or being within the sport gets to teach you. Did you walk away from debate with any of these valuable non-debate lessons, like in terms of what character traits did debating get you to develop? What values did it get you to strengthen that you think is one thing that you would hold on to even if you are no more within the debate space?
Yeah, no, I mean, lots of lessons. Like, for one, I just think it taught me more about the world,
Yeah,
because I think that you're able to be more conscious. You're more conscious of like all of like political issues around you, the struggles of people that you otherwise wouldn't have read about or known because of debating. I think it made me a lot more empathetic, um, because you really, I mean, when you know that you could be in a position where you have to justify like why maybe like this particular place should get independence, or you have to
Yeah.
justify why we should boycott this brand or something like
Yeah.
that. You are more inclined to read about things from the perspective of people and not just like vaguely read over it. And, so you really absorb information better. So I think for me, it taught me a lot more about just people, their struggles, what they're going through, and gave me a lot more empathy towards people. I think, like, even in terms of being more critical, so being like critically thinking through things and not just taking everything on face value. So when it comes to reading news, actually critically thinking if this news source is reliable, what are the motives, who's funding this news source, stuff like that. I think I've learned a lot more in debating. And then just like resilience, um, being able to come back from losses, not taking losses
Yeah.
personally, even when it is very painful, um, being able to be positive. So even when you lose, there's still positive things you can take from a loss, or like even if you're not like super thrilled about how you did in a tournament, there's still positive things you can walk away with. Um, yeah, those would be like, I think also like being able to listen and
Yeah.
grow, because
Yeah.
honestly, I like I said, I really think that the reason that I was able to stay in debating as long as I did and felt like I had like growth in the space is because me and Linda were really particular about feedback. So sometimes you don't
Yeah.
like the feedback, but really being able to listen and internalize, and also being able to learn from people. Because in the initial, like I remember that first nationals where we were in the top room and we didn't feel like we deserved to be there. I remember listening because I respected those people so much and they were so good. I remember listening to the arguments that they came up with and using those arguments in the next room. And
Yeah.
I never even thought that I could sound like those guys, but just being able to grow from one another is a skill that I
Yeah.
really valued. Um, and it's because of debating. But I think in general, debating does make you like a lot more. I think it makes you a more complex individual. You're more critical of the world around you. You're more engaged in things. You're
Yeah.
not just going through life, just reading
That's
news and you know.
That is true. I mean, for me, particularly about listening, uh, funny enough, is something I said twice yesterday. That debate is more about listening than it is about speaking, because we get
Mm,
drawn into mixing up that. Because yesterday, the kids I coach went for a competition, and one of the sections have you to um, like more like a cross-examination section and all that. I told them, I know like you are so excited about your questions that you've drafted because you think they are killer questions, and you are so excited about your arguments. But I want you to know debate is more about listening than it is about speaking. And we need
mm,
to learn that art of listening, because the difference between, for instance, you having a bad debate round but still winning, and having a good debate round but still losing, is all based on who it's being compared to. If you have a bad debate round and it's compared to somebody who had a poorer performance than you did, you win. So debate is really just about beating the person opposite to you, and not really being outstanding. Because if you're outstanding and the person opposite to you is exceptional, you've still lost, right? So
yeah,
listen, and that's the goal. And I remember making a joke out of it to Erasmus yesterday as well. So it's one thing that for me, like reading these recent weeks and months, have really stood out for me. Just listening to people,
yeah,
breaking things down from their perspective, understanding them, and then that also giving you more meaningful ways to relate to people in life.
yeah. I think that's also the value of like maybe international debating is
Yeah,
when you leave your own context and then you go into debate in a completely different place, you realize how different people's values there are, how different their way of thinking is. So I think you really understand differences between people and you're able to engage with it and respect it more, because now you have to compete in this space where the rules of the society are very different to the one that you're used to.
Yeah.
So, like the premises, like I always used to say that the secret to understanding international debating is to understand that premises are different. So, in one part of the world, you can say something and it's totally accepted as a fact, and you go to another part of the world and it's not really, like, you actually have to put in a few lines to justify why that's true.
Yeah. So we are nearing the latter part of the conversation. This part would get a little bit more interesting and slightly more violent, right? Violent
Okay.
in in debate violent terms. But first of all, I mean, you dominated the space for a very long time. There's in debate, there's always the conversation about the greatest of all time. Um, debaters are very egotistic people, so always there's a conversation about who is the greatest of all time. I'm going to ask you two questions, both of which, regardless of
Mhm.
how you respond, is definitely going to spark controversy.
Oh no.
So so the first one is, who is your greatest African female debater of all time? And the second one is, within the scope of African female debaters that you've seen, where would you position yourself if I'm asking you to rank top five best African debaters of all time, African debaters of all time, and also African female debaters of all time? Yeah,
Oh, that is so hard. So it's
it was
different.
intentional.
Obviously, my context is my period that I competed in.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't been up to date. I'm sure like things have changed. I don't know a lot about what happened before or after I was there. But for my period of time, I would obviously say Lindo is my greatest, and that's because I think Lindo's a very underrated debater because I don't think she maybe I just think that she's a little bit more low key. She's not like as present
yeah.
on social events. She's more like introverted. But honestly, when I look at it, every single performance that Linda puts out is very, very consistently good. And I think because I got a front row seat of it, she's just very knowledgeable about a lot of things. Like her knowledge is it's truly quite amazing. Like her ability to generate matter is really amazing. And like I'll be honest, in most other partnerships, I was always a matter generator. Like in most other partnerships, as soon as the timer started, I knew that there was a lot of pressure for me to generate matter. But with Linda, I knew that Linda was definitely the matter generator. And like if I didn't know anything about the topic, I know she would come up with something. It was, um, I just she's just very very bright and
So so like we say from 2018 to 2020 or 2021,
yeah.
Lindo is greatest female African debater of all time within that
Yeah,
period.
no, for
That's
me for sure,
that's
for sure.
if you
Um,
if you were to
because
rank top three female debaters, where would you position yourself?
I don't know.
Because if I should put this to a vote, and let's just cast our memory back within that period of African debate, if we were to go for a public vote of top three African debaters, and you were on the list, and Lindo was on the list, and any other person was on the list, I can vouch that you would be number one.
um, I think I did have a really good. I worked really hard in that period of time, and I was very present. So I like whenever there was a tournament, I would never say no to it. I would always compete in every single thing, and I do think
Yeah.
I was very consistent. Um, and I think yeah, like I mean, I think I had a good run. But I will say I do think I I competed a lot with the men as well. Like I think I could have
Yeah.
I think the thing about the Southern African circuit is, especially in the period of time that I was there, is I think our female debaters were very on par, if not better than our male counterparts. Um, so I would definitely say mine and Lindo's was a all female partnership that dominated. But even as individuals, I think we could take the guys.
Yeah, that's true. Within that period, though, since we are taking this as you not knowing a lot about before and after, within that period, top five African debaters within that period who dominated the space, with you inclusive, give me your list.
Do I really have to give a definitive list?
Yeah.
Um,
Or if you could
may
give me names that rank within that five, but I
Okay,
want a
I'll
definitive
say
list
names that
one,
rank
two,
within
three.
that five. I don't know the specifics of the five.
Okay.
Um, okay. I mean, I'll put Erasmus there for sure. I'll put you
Okay.
there for sure.
Okay.
Um, who
With
else?
you
Who else?
inclusive though. So
Do I have to include myself?
no, no, no. With you inclusive of the people you are considering for the top five.
I'm trying to think. Who else would I put in my top five? I'll put Lindo there for sure
Okay.
because I have to. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of big names that I was really scared of.
Why are you
Um,
avoiding putting yourself on the list?
I don't know. I just think it's weird. Okay, to be honest, I think if you have to be good at debating, you have to back yourself.
Yeah,
So you have to, in your head, believe that you're number one always. Like
exactly.
that's just the mentality you have to have. But I know
Yeah.
that's not an objective reflection. Like I feel like I'm a I'm a competitive person. In my head, competitive people have to believe they're number one. But you also have to have the wisdom to know that you can't judge yourself because you're not objective.
No, so right now we are trusting you to be objective. So
No, but I
just give
really
us a
can't
rank.
be objective. Okay, well, I would put myself in the top five based on the fact that I competed a lot. So I was on a lot of
Yeah.
tabs.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
that is true. Uh, but I can't say I'm like number one or something because, like, I don't think. I mean, I actually
I'll,
genuinely don't think that's true. But
when I
I don't
retire
think
from
one can
debates,
be
I'll
objective.
publish my ranking. So watch
No,
out.
what is your ranking? You're asking, but you're not giving a lot here.
That's the fun part of being the host. I get to create the questions. So I get to escape any uncomfortable questions you ask me. But the second question for you is if you were in a world semi-final, and in a semi-final, I generally just believe semi-finals are even much more difficult than finals because the stakes there are so
Yeah, no,
high.
there.
In a world semi-final where it's a must-win room with the world's best, and you have to choose between Faithfulness Okom and Erasmus Segbefia to whip because you are in CEO. Between these two speakers, who are you picking and why?
So for me, I've never spoken with Faithfulness, and I actually think Faithfulness. I never really interacted with him because I think he competed a lot a little bit before my time, so I never really had interaction with him. So
But
I
you
would
saw
definitely
Faithfulness
say,
at PADC 2019.
did
And so
I
this question, faithfulness broke first at PADC 2019. He was
really?
the one on this 6 round streak, untouchable. He's absolutely outstanding.
Uh
And so the
huh.
question I'm asking you here is really not about maybe your relation with them in pure chances, right? In terms of pure strategic choices that you're making. Faithfulness was for a long time the most decorated speaker in Africa. Erasmus has won PADC back to back, and is one of the good whips you've seen. Faithfulness in whip is outstanding. He's known to be the most devastating speaker you'd ever have in closing. Between these two speakers, who are you picking? Because remember, it's a must-win
I'd
room.
pick
It's a world
Erasmus
semi-final.
because Erasmus is honestly, even my list, like my list of speakers that I think are phenomenal, are also people who I've spoken
Yeah,
with. Because the
yeah.
consistency, like sometimes as an audience or as a competition, you can't gauge how you can't gauge like how mentally prepared someone is for something, but I think when you know someone as a partner, it's very different because you're able to see how they handle not knowing something about a topic, or how they handle prep, or
Oh,
how they
okay.
handle listening
Okay.
to you, and how they handle like backing you. So I think
Yeah.
you get to know someone a lot better when you speak with them. So for me, it have to be Erasmus, because honestly Erasmus is one of the people that I spoke with a few times as well. And like I can honestly say, like, my respect for Erasmus, I obviously had seen him speak before, but my respect for Erasmus just went so high after we spoke together. Because, like,
Sure, by
I
this
know,
time his
like,
head is inflating somewhere with all this praise. His head is definitely inflating somewhere.
I know now, like, how he is as a partner. Like, I know that he can support your speeches and he can, like,
Yeah,
be supportive. I know that he generates so much matter during prep sessions. He has composure during prep sessions. It's like those kinds of things that separate you from being someone who can debate and then being someone who's a great debater. Like
yeah.
partnership and teamwork in a debate in debating is a very underrated thing. Oh, my fifth person
It's
on my list would
hugely
have to be
underrated.
Masharia. My fifth, that would be my fifth person.
Ah, okay. Let's switch this question then. Masharia Erasmus.
Masharia or Erasmus?
Yeah,
In a world semi,
yeah.
it was hard because both of them I'm very close to, but I would
That's
say
why I'm asking you.
with Erasmus, it's like more if I just think Erasmus and me when I spoke with Erasmus, he whipped most of the time. So
Yeah.
I would have a lot of faith in Erasmus's whips. With Mishaya, sometimes I used to whip when I spoke with him.
I would screen. I would just cut the specific section of the episode and send it to Masharia's DM just to see his
No,
reaction.
no, but Mishaya is also Mishaya is someone who I respect so so much because
Yeah, he's
I
an
feel
he's
like
an outstanding speaker.
me and him have a similar, I think, work ethic when it comes to debating because I think he
Yeah,
works really hard. And I think he's someone who I related to a lot because it genuinely was a product of hard work. Like he really is just determined and works hard. That is just who Masharia is. And
yeah.
I feel like for me, I also why I tried to work hard at it. So like I feel like
That's true. You know,
yeah.
South Africa, there's a big question about who is South Africa's greatest ever speaker. There are lots of African debate legends that hail from South Africa. You have Mighty Jamie, you have uh, maybe not South Africa, maybe Southern Africa, the likes of Oliver Dixon. I've forgotten a lot of the names, but
Nonhlanhla,
who,
definitely
yeah, who
one.
would you pick as your greatest ever Southern African debater?
My greatest ever South African debater. Mm, I mean, for me, I would still say it's probably Lindo for me or Nonhlanhla. Nonhlanhla because I know that she was like a mentor to me and Lindo, so I respect her a lot.
Okay,
And then Lindo just because I think, I mean, I did compete with Oliver Dixon and Mighty Jamie, but I don't think the
yeah,
bulk of my career was coincided with
with
theirs.
them, yeah,
Yeah, so I just think debating changed a lot after that. And I think when you look at people who are able to take, like UCT has always had an international presence, but UCT has
yeah,
also not had an African presence. And
yeah,
I think that they didn't really want to have a big African presence. But if you look at someone who's able to have both an African presence and international presence, was able to
yeah.
grow and to show consistency. Like Lindo's definitely up there. Like
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, this is going to be a hot take because I know, and maybe it also reflects, like you're saying, how much we've underrated Lindo, and also probably because a lot of highly respected debaters have equally a lot more to do with their debate celebrity status beyond
Yes.
how good they are as debaters. And so if you're a really good debater and you don't end up crafting that celebrity status, you probably do not end up in the conversations that
Yeah.
allow people to give you the credit in those instances.
I mean, I just, yeah, I agree. I just think, but I think that the culture also changed because I feel like when the debaters of like a lot of the time in Southern Africa, it was quite toxic. Like a lot of the time, there was always like dramatic fights and feuds between people. And I feel like the space was also about like proving something. But I
Yeah,
think after, like around the time when, again, like the bulk of mine and Lindo's career, I definitely think that it was a positive space. Like everyone, it wasn't like I can tell you so many times people would come and message me and just ask for like advice on things, like random things. Like they would just ask me like, how do I find my PMs? How do I do this? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And I was like more than happy to give that
Yeah.
feedback because that was the culture we created. It was like a more positive space. It wasn't like no one was really fighting with anyone. There weren't like big feuds or anything. It was just like a good space to be in where I think our entire goal was to make our circuit good so that we were at the level of worlds. That was like a collective goal, whereas before it was like more individualistic goals.
Yeah, yeah. I think that community and the communal aspect of debating, a lot of people probably don't give it credit that much. But the fact that you could go to someone, just ask them for their time to help you develop in something at zero cost for them to dedicate that effort. Even sometimes for them to pay attention to you to the extent that they would monitor your performances and try to give you feedback was
Right?
is a unique thing that debate offers that you struggle to get in other spaces. But two more to go, no, maybe one more controversial one. Then the
Okay.
final one would be you. You, um, for me, is one of the most sensational female speakers Africa has seen. I mean, if we're judging, like you're saying, if we are judging people based on quality, consistency, the kind of the kind of genuineness that you see in the effort, in the growth, in the performance, and the kind of trust that you have that this person would deliver when you put them on a big stage. You rank up there for me. But when it comes to, for instance, winning these, what you would call institutional competitions like PADC or nationals, which, by the way, people criticize when you've not been able to win them. Like people's, you've not been to win PADC, you're probably not that great a speaker, etc. And this story that I'm telling applies to you, who are, I think, is the best I've seen. Compared to you, who, of course, there are equally other very, very good female debaters within the space, and I also keep on trying. But you'd realize that when it comes to winning streaks, the comparative between men and women, it's just vast within the space, right? Do you think it's a matter of luck that maybe women are lucky enough when they get into the finals to win? Do you spot any fundamental issues that underpin this that we need to start addressing?
So I will say, coming from the Southern African circuit, in the Southern African
Yeah,
circuit, especially when I was there, like the Southern African circuit is really, it is on the, there are phenomenal women that have been able to really create that circuit. So like people
yeah,
like Nhlanhla, like Ati, people like Ansuya, like Bettina, people like Charity, they really have been able to, like, they're not just good female debaters, they're just good debaters, period. They're better than the men. They're just that good.
yeah,
So the Southern African circuit is not as patriarchal, I would say. However, when I came, I remember my first PAUDC in Tanzania.
yeah,
It was an all female. I was competing with Atlehang, all female team, and
yeah,
we were definitely the only all female team that was doing well. But we were the only females in general in the top room. Like every single top room, it was like all the judges were men. We were just the only woman in the room, and at
yeah.
first I could see because I think that was the first time like I met a lot of big names in debating, and I could see that when we walked in the room, they undermined us. Like they thought we
Who's
weren't going to
this?
be so serious.
Yeah. Why are they here? Did they lose their way?
Yeah, like they I could tell that they were just like, oh, these guys are just gonna come here and take the fourth. And when we showed up and we were really competitive, like I could see that they were very shocked. So by the
Yeah,
by the end of the tournament, because we had been consistent in the top room, that perception changed. But initially, I could definitely feel that we were undermined. Um, so women in the African circuit, I feel it's very difficult to be a woman in the African circuit because you are undermined a lot. I also think that people discourage people from being in all female partnerships, because every time we
Yeah.
were in I was in I've most of my career I've spoken in all female partnerships, but
Yeah.
every time that's been the case, it's always been like, no, you should probably speak with a man because it will like it the stats are better if you speak with a man. So I definitely feel like there is a lot of patriarchy in the debating
Yeah.
space. I think the way, I don't know if maybe it needs to go to edge training, or I don't really know how to undo those biases, but those biases definitely exist. I mean, even the fact that like I feel like I feel like I've I feel like I was good and better than some of the men in debating, but I feel
Definitely.
like
I mean that's not even a question. Like there was this era, even post PADC 2019, that COVID period 2020. And that's why, for instance, when I was introducing you, I was very deliberate about the choice of words about you holding the African debate space to ransom for a very long time, because that was a period where you go to competitions, you meet Anam, you know what's coming. Just take it and move on. Yeah, like it wasn't a negotiation with, oh, is she the best or is she good in, she was the best. She was just terrorizing competitions. And I say she as if I'm talking. You were the best. You were just terrorizing competitions, and that was the end of story. So I get you. Like some of these women in debates are actually good, way better than
yeah,
the male competitors.
much
Maybe
better.
they are just not given the credit enough.
Yeah. And I think it has to also do with like coaching, right? So like I feel like a lot of the time with men, a lot of the time when it comes to juniors, a lot of the time men will identify other men who they want to mentor, and they'll like believe in them
Yeah,
and they'll partner with them and take them to tournaments. And it
yeah,
really builds your confidence when you feel like as a junior, like my
yeah,
seniors see me and they're going to mentor me. So I feel
yeah.
like with women, it's like, oh, you're just there, or like you're just gonna edge, or you're not gonna be like that fierce and that competitive. So there isn't like a big figure that takes you under their wing. And I think that's what like determines the trajectory of people's careers, is when they're identified early and then they're taken under someone's wing who can really like teach them.
That's absolutely true. And there's one thing that you used to do that I really liked about you was you had this thing where junior speakers asked you for partnership, and so far as it was feasible, you would partner them and speak with them. Because
Yeah.
there was this Ghanaian tournament we were doing, I think it was a round robin by the University of Energy and Natural Resources. And then you partnered Zoe. And then I saw you on the tab and I was like, what's she doing here? Like I thought this tournament was a safe space. Exit the bullying and come around here and come and bully people a little bit. Only to find out you had followed to the competition as well. And for me the most interesting part was knowing Zoe, the experience she had, and even the confidence it gave her afterwards that you partnered her. She had learned new things. She could go on and then compete. So that's really good. My final thing here is that there are lots of people who are trapped within this debating bubble of whether to leave or stay. I think we had this discussion early on, your decision to retire and how you got there. For you, you were disciplined, you had clear timelines and clear goals. And after that, you felt that's it. I'm satisfied and I can walk away. But there are a lot of people who are trapped within this transitioning phase and are never able to walk away from it because they feel sort of trapped within the debate space, but also keep questioning whether it is worth it staying, right? You, if any of those people should walk up to you now and ask, this is where I am. I know you've crossed that period, but then I need some advice to help me get over the line. What would you tell them?
I would just tell them to ask themselves what they want out of it. Because if they're just staying for the sake of staying, then they shouldn't stay. If there's some sort of goal that they want to achieve, then they should stay. But I think they should frame it as, what am I getting
Okay,
out of it? Because there's
okay,
always going to be a goal you want to achieve. Like there's always going to be some tournament or something that you can bet your CV. There's always going to be something you can win.
Yeah.
But just ask yourself, what am I getting out of this at this point? Because if you're not actually, like, even if, like, at that point when I'd retired, or like when I was considering retirement, honestly, even if I'd gone to 10 more tournaments and won 10 more titles, I don't think that I was getting anything more out of it, because to myself, I'd proven that I'd mastered this craft for myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like there wasn't anything that I had to prove beyond that. So I
Yeah.
wasn't, it was just like a lot of input. And I just felt like I want to prioritize my career at this point, and I want to prioritize branching out and focusing on other things. Because it also, you know, that you're not, your heart's not in it when you have to make sacrifices and it doesn't feel worth it. So like I was missing, for example, I was missing like birthday parties, or like missing maybe like study time, or missing like other things, because there's always going to be an
Yeah.
opportunity cost when I was going to debating. And initially that didn't bother me because I was having a good time at debating and I was getting something out of it. But near the end, it was just like every time I had to miss something for debating, I was just like, "Ugh," like I don't want to anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like actually want to go out. I actually
To
want to
go.
do something else with my time. And it's
Yeah.
not like a hateful thing. Like I didn't hate debating or anything. It's just like it just ran its course for me.
I get. I mean, that's a good that final framing is actually a good way to decide, I guess, when debates clashes with something else, which one do you strongly feel like going to? If the
Yes.
feelings of going to that other thing starts outweighing debate, probably that's the signal people should be looking out for. But thank you very much, and this has been an interesting conversation. It's really really been a nice episode. I know definitely people will enjoy this. And so that wraps up another episode of the Shaft podcast. We hope you enjoyed the adventure as much as we did. Before we part ways, I leave you with two things. Like just like I asked you at the beginning of this episode, remember to subscribe and share with your network so we grow our channel, because the bigger it gets, the bigger the guests would get. And we also want to extend our deepest gratitude to Anam for making the time to join us on this episode, sharing her story, sharing her debate experiences, and insights that would be valuable to our listeners and viewers as well. If you loved what you heard, do well to stay connected with us, subscribe, enjoy, listen via Spotify, Google Podcasts, and also on YouTube as well. Join us again next time for another riveting episode of the Shaft Podcast. Until then, take care, stay curious, and keep seeking out the wonders of our debating world on this journey with us. Thank you very much and have a great time.
Thanks for having me.